Hey guys, it's Caroline from Chaos Theory here with a new Among Us. I know it's been a while since we've done one of those. Just to let you know, I've got a bunch coming up. We are starting today with something that took a long time before they actually found our killer. And I am talking about BTK today. So, if you guys don't already know, there is a documentary right now on Netflix with his daughter explaining, how she, as a daughter of a serial killer, has dealt with all of this stuff and how the parents have dealt with everything. So it's been a struggle, guys. It has not been easy for her and her family. So we are going to talk about BTK, who BTK is, and why did it take almost 30 years, guys, 30 years to find this man. All right, so let's get into it. So BTK, what does that mean? What does it stand for? So it was a term coined for this killer because this is how he signed his letters. So he would send letters out to newspapers, to TV stations, and he would sign BTK. And BTK stands for bind them, torture them, and kill them. So this is how people referred to him. They had no idea who he was. They just called him BTK. Okay. So BTK's crime spree pretty much started in January of 1974. It went all the way to 1991, and he was finally caught in 2005. There were some stuff between 91 and 2005, but it wasn't as big as the crimes that he did between 1974 and 1991. During this period, we are sure that he had killed at least 10 people. We don't know if there's more. Think about back in the 70s, guys. There wasn't the internet like we have now. There wasn't DNA like we have now. There's a lot of stuff probably that we don't know he did just because we don't have the proof, okay? He's never talked about he talked about his crime when he was arrested, the ones that the police talked to him about. But other than that, he never confessed to any extra ones. He never wants to talk about any extra ones. So we don't know, but we know for sure 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you guys about each crime, and then we're going to go into who BTK is and how he was finally caught. It's pretty actually funny. So let's get into it. The first BTK murder was a horrific murder that happened to a family called the Otero family. And in the family, there were 7 members. There were 5 kids and 2 parents. Now, in January 1974, 3 of the older children had gone off to school. The parents, Joe Sr. and Julie, were left at home with their 2 youngest children, Joe Jr. and Josephine. Somebody came to their door, wanted something, pushed himself in. They murdered Joe Sr. He tied up Mrs. Otero, Julie. He tied her up. Then he took the kids. He put Joe Jr. in a closet, and he took little Josephine, who I think was 10, into the basement. And Josephine, I think, got the worst of it. Okay, Josephine was strung up to a pipe in the basement and slowly suffocated. She was probably tortured, and unfortunately, she passed away. He shot, like we said, the father, he shot the mother, and he also shot Joe Jr. The tragic part of this whole story is that the 3 kids came home from school and they found the rest of their family deceased. Now, when BTK was finally arrested, they spoke about the Otero murder because this was really the base, right? This was what started it all for BTK. And he actually admitted that he had been stalking the family for weeks before the murder, which is really strange. Why would you stalk a family? What's the point? Were they rude to you? Were they There was no reason behind it. He decided to stalk this family, and he decided to go through with the murders. If we continue in 1974, 3 months later, in April of 1974, Catherine Bright was murdered. She had come home with her brother Kevin, and unfortunately, she did not make it. Kevin got shot by BTK, but was never, in dire, he wasn't going to die. He actually made it through. Now, the thing that happens with Catherine is he starts naming these murders, these projects that he has. And Catherine Bright was referred to as Project Lights Out. Really, really strange. So he broke into her home at first, but no one was there. Then she arrived with her brother, and BTK bound up the sister, fought Kevin. Kevin was tied up at some point. He untied himself, and he got shot in the forehead. Guys, he got shot in the forehead. How do you survive that? But he actually did. He survived that. Kevin, when he got free after being shot in the head, ran to a neighbor, and they called the police, and BTK was off again. He stabbed Catherine, and she passed away from her stab wounds, unfortunately. But could have been worse for Katie, as she was called, because he could have tortured her for hours if Kevin had passed away. Then there was a little break from 1974 to 1977. We are now in March of 1977, and we are talking about Shirley Vian. Shirley wasn't the intended victim at first, which is the really weird part. He had another victim that day, but because that victim wasn't home, he went out looking for another victim. And he came across Shirley's 5-year-old son named Stephen. Stephen had been sent to the store to get something for his mom who was sick. So he was coming back, and BTK was there, and he said, "Oh, where's your mom?" And Stephen, 5 years old, very innocent, there wasn't stranger danger back then, said, "Oh, my mom's home, she's sick." And so he said, "Well, I got to talk to your mom, I know her." And so Stephen brought BTK home. He passed himself off as a detective to get into the house. So he said, "Oh, we need to talk to each other, blah, blah, blah." He then took her 3 kids, because she had 3 children. He put them in the bathroom, locked the door. He put a plastic bag over her head, and then strangled. He wanted to get rid of the kids too, because they had seen him. This was liability. But the phone rang when he was about to do it, and he ran out of the house. So that phone call saved those 3 children. And to this day, Stephen is very much still, why did I do this? Why did I bring this man home? But at the same time, people are trying to explain to him, you can't, you were a child. Your mom, she sacrificed herself for you guys. So see it that way. Shirley was the other one. And then in 1977, there was another murder, okay? The murder of Nancy Jo Fox that happened in December. Now, he stalked her for a long time before deciding to murder. Why the stalking all the time? I'm not quite sure. Was it a way for him to choose his victims? I don't know. But he called her Project Fox Hunt because her last name was Fox. He broke into her house, but she wasn't home. When she arrived, he said that he intended to restrain her, to take photos, and her. He put a belt around her neck and would tighten and loosen it while he... The next morning, he called the police to report the crime. He called the police. It's insane to me to think that if you're a serial murderer, you don't actually think about calling. Or was it a bragging situation? Maybe, right? Now, there was another murder that could have been associated with BTK, but he never actually said that he had done it. So this was called the Fagger Murders, and this happened in December of 1978. Now, it says that a father and his two daughters were killed in their home. His daughters, Sherry and Kelly, were found in the hot tub. Shelley was drowned and Kelly was strangled and placed in the tub many hours later. So she must have been tortured and then put in the tub. Their father, Melvin, was shot. BTK always said that he admired the homicide but never claimed it as his. So was this like a, oh, I like this murderer, I like this serial killer, he did a great job, let me see if I can do this? It's a weird thing but let's face it, girls, hot tub, father shot, it could have been the MO for BTK for sure. But this one, like we said, never really pinned it on BTK. Now, in 1979, there was an attempted murder on a woman called Anna Williams. She was a 63-year-old woman that Rader intended on killing, but she wasn't home. And he got tired of waiting and left before she got home. He got tired of waiting. It's just the weirdest thing, guys. So he left a note on her door 2 months after this whole incident stating, "Why didn't you appear?" and left some mementos for him in an envelope. So this woman comes home, finds this note going, what? Somebody tried to kill me? A little crazy. Then we also have another gap. Okay, so we have 1979. Now we're going to April 1985. In April 1985, a woman called Maureen Hedge was referred to as Project Cookie. Weird names, I don't know. So BTK was a Cub Scout leader. Okay, you still don't know his name unless you know who BTK is. But he was at a Cub Scout meeting. And he faked a headache to go do this murder. So he was actually in, I don't know, with his Cub Scouts in a field somewhere, faked a headache to go murder this woman. He hid in her closet and he waited until her boyfriend left. So her boyfriend and her were there at the house. He waited until she was alone. Think about it, Kevin, other people that could walk in. Bad idea, right? You want to do this alone. So he waited until she was alone. He strangled her. He took her to his church and then took pictures of her. He then dumped her in a ditch and covered her. So this was a bit of a different MO. He's taking pictures of her. And his daughter actually said, they showed me these pictures that my dad had taken, and I remembered that tree. I remembered exactly where this was. This was at our church, which is very spooky. In 1986, there's a woman named Vicky Wegerly who was called Project Piano, and he pretended to be a telephone technician to gain entry into her home. He forced her into the bathroom, tied her up, but she got loose, scratched his face, but he still killed her and took pictures of her body for SCX purpose. You'll hear more about who BTK is and his little kookiness about certain things. Then between 1986 and 1991, there's a few years again, and Dolores Davis in January of 1991 was called Project Dogside. So he was again on a retreat with his scouts, then said he had to go home, and he went to stalk her. He stalked her and watched her home until the lights went out. Then he broke in. She begged for her life as he strangled her with pantyhose. He dragged her body into the trunk of his car and he drove to a dump site. So those are the major crimes that he was accused of. Now, BTK, how did we put it together that this was all the same murder? Remember, we're back 70s, 80s. We don't have the internet like we have now. There's DNA has barely started in the 90s. How do we put all of this together? Well, we put all of this together because BTK was a very much an egocentric man who wanted people to know what he had done. He wanted to take ownership of these murders. So he, like I said, made many, many, many communications with newspapers, with news stations, TV stations, and he would boast about his killings. He'd be like, "Yep, I did it. I did, no problem. I did it." Now, what happened is that first murder in 1974, the Oteros, two other people were convicted of those murders because they bragged that they had done it. Well, BTK wrote a letter in 1974 and he took responsibility for those murders. And he said, "It's not the people that you think you have. I'm the one who did this." And this is when the BTK name came out. This is the title of the letter that he sent to the KAKE TV station, in which he claimed murder for the Otero, Bright, Redford, and Fox murder. He said, "How many do I have to kill?" That was the title of his letter. Like, how much of a jerk do you have to be? It's beyond me. He wanted media attention. He wanted people to talk about him, but he didn't want people to know who he was. Obviously, he wanted to keep murdering, right? Now, during his times off, like I said, you know how there's a couple years here and there? Well, stuff was found in BTK's home that's a little bit shocking, but I mean, remember Ed Gein, guys? Remember when we talked about Ed Gein dressing up like his mom? Well, BTK kind of did the same thing. He would dress up like a woman. He would wear a female mask. He bound himself. He would take pictures of this. He basically used this and the pictures that he took as part of his sex fantasy. Okay. He had restraining orders against him when he was younger against women for stalking them. So this is a pattern. This is a pattern. But again, back then, guys, we don't talk. The police corps do not talk to each other. The FBI doesn't talk to the police. The just between the cities, they don't talk to each other, okay? A lot of this was in Wichita. A lot of this was in Park City. So agencies don't talk to each other. So it became really, really hard to kind of pinpoint somebody. He slowed down his killings because he got married, guys, and he had children. He didn't have time to kill. So who's BTK, right? You guys are like chomping at the bit, wanting to know who is this guy. BTK's real name is actually Dennis Rader. Now, Dennis Rader is a man who was born in 1945 from a very seemingly very normal family. His daughter, Carrie Rawson, actually speaks about how they did really normal stuff. Like they went camping, they went hiking, they went, very normal. But her dad was very particular about certain things. He had to be, given his plate first. Shoes had to be placed a certain way. So he had these little, quirks about him. And like I said, he was married. He got married in 1971. And he has a daughter, Carrie, and a son who we don't know his name. He never went public. Now, he worked as a compliance officer for the city of Park City. And he was also president of his church, guys. He was president of his congregation, Christ Lutheran Church. Okay? So this is a man of God doing really, really effed up stuff. Okay? We'll talk about, his conviction and all of that, but so how did we catch Dennis? How do we know that BTK was Dennis, right? So in 2004, which is 30 years after the Otero murders, who still hasn't been solved, guys, because the guy that they thought they had, it wasn't him, clearly. We have somebody else saying that he did it. So we are 30 years into this murder. There's still nothing to be done. We're trying to put stuff together with Unsolved Mysteries. And so what happens is the Wichita Police Department decides, okay, this is a cold case, but we got to do something about this. We got to find who this killer is. So they started talking about it more in the news, right? Spark up. Did you guys see anything? This was in 1974. We know it was 30 years ago, but maybe you guys remember something. He then started to send messages and send letters to take ownership of the murder. So he actually said, no, I'm still here. I'm still around. Don't worry. Like, I haven't gone anywhere. He also left packages. And this is the really weird stuff, guys. And, left packages at a Home Depot store. He left packages by the side of the road. And he would tell police officers, hey, go to this area. You're going to find a package. In one of the packages, there was like a doll wrapped up with a rope inside of like a Kellogg's box. Like the weirdest stuff. Like it didn't make any sense. What they were able to find though is because he went to the Home Depot store, they were able to identify his vehicle. So he had a Jeep Cherokee. So they were able to say, hey, this is the car that dropped this package off. So we got to look into it. So the final way that he got caught, and I swear you guys are gonna laugh. This is like ridiculous. The police and him went back and forth in the newspapers. You know, in the wanted ads, so they would write coded messages for each other. And he finally wrote a message to the police saying, hey, if I send you a floppy disk, can you identify me? Is it possible to identify somebody from a floppy disk? And then the police wrote back to him saying, don't worry, no, there's no way of finding out. Guys, okay. So he sends them this floppy disk. What do you think the first thing they did was? They looked at where this floppy disk was last used, and they found out that it was used at a Christ Lutheran church, and the last person to have access to the floppy disk was a man named Dennis. So they did their research and found out that this Dennis in person was actually Dennis Rader. And that's how BTK was found out. From a floppy disk, guys. Okay? Completely ridiculous. So then they started looking into who is Dennis Rader. Like, we've never heard of this guy. This guy has no police record. Yeah, okay, he had some, stalker stuff back in the 70s, but like, whatever, nothing really bad. He's a compliance officer for the city, for Pete's sakes. Like, he's president of his church. This doesn't make any sense. So they wanted to make sure, they wanted to be solid that this was actually the man. And for certain murders, they had found blood that didn't go with the victim, and they had kept it. Because like we said, back in the 70s and 80s, DNA wasn't a huge thing. Now it was. Now we could actually take those samples, compare them to Dennis Rader, and see if there's a match. But how do you get Dennis Rader's blood? He's not going to come in and just give you his blood. We want to make sure, we want to be super solid that this is actually him. So they started looking into him. They found a Jeep Cherokee at his home. Ding, ding. Great. That's great. Then they started looking into his family and his kids. And his daughter had been going to university and had a pap smear done at university, because any good lady gets pap smears, and we make sure that we don't have anything wrong with ourselves. And so what they did is they requested that pap smear, and they took the blood from the victim, and they concluded that there was a match. It's not Carrie, but there's a match because the blood, there's similarities, there. And so the DNA was a match. And so they said, we have our man. This is the killer that we have been looking for 30 years. He was arrested on February 25th, 2005, shortly after noon, as he was coming home for lunch. The detectives arrested him, and he asked the detectives, Please call my wife and tell her I won't be home for lunch. I assume you know where I live. So they said, okay, no problem. Right away, they stopped at the house. They grabbed all of the stuff that they could find. In his home, he had a kill kit that was found in a closet with rope, a knife, and other tools. They found trophies from his victims in his shed. Like we said, we found pictures. And then they sat down with him at the station to talk about these murders, to see, hey, we want you to admit that you are BTK. And then everything came out. Yeah, I did it. Yeah, it's me. Yeah. No remorse. Taking full credit for everything that he had done, but didn't give them extra information that they didn't. So on June 27th of 2005, because he pled not guilty at first, he pled guilty finally. He had a mental evaluation done, and they found that he was a narcissistic, obsessive compulsive, and antisocial personality disorder. So he had all of these things. On August 18, 2005, he was sentenced to a minimum of 175 years. Could there be more victims? Absolutely. He's not talking. So, one thing that the detectives really wanted to do was use Carrie, his daughter, to see if she could coax him into being like, Dad, is there more victims? You need to let me know. Like, you've killed all of these people. Is there more? And basically never admitted to anything, never said that that there was more. We're sure that there's something. There has to be a little bit more, right? But it's hard to really pinpoint anything if the person is not willing to cooperate, right? So he was convicted of first degree murder on 10 counts and got 10 consecutive life sentences, so 175 years. And then, like we said, his daughter, was 26 when her father got arrested. She had just had a child, she was married. This completely changed her life because now everybody knows, Dennis Rader, this compliance officer from Park City, who's Joe Blow, who's a team scout leader, who's a president of his congregation. This guy can't be a killer. Come on. And in this documentary that's called My Father, the BTK Killer, Carrie really goes into how hard it was for her mom, and her brother to kind of survive all of this because the media came down on them like, how come you never knew? How can you not know that your husband's a serial killer? Well, Dennis Rader had a double life. He really did. He did a lot of murders before he had children, and he did murders between the time that his kids were young. So there's no way of knowing, right? And she always said, we had no clue. He was a normal dad. He treated me like a tomboy. He would take me out. I would do everything with my dad, but he was a little controlling on some things. He's a little OCD. You couldn't leave your shoes. He had to decide what activities everybody did. You couldn't eat before he did. You couldn't sit in his chair. There's a lot of things that you couldn't do in that house. It took her 10 years to really kind of get over it. And then she decided that she wanted to talk about it and that she wanted to try to help if she could. And so she decided to speak out, and she wrote a book. And the book is called A Serial Killer's Daughter. I highly recommend it if you guys want to get, most of the time we get autobiographies, if you will, of serial killers written by somebody. This is actually the daughter. This, very few serial killers had children and had families. So this is a really interesting way of saying, hey, as a daughter of a serial killer, how do you feel? Do you feel like, why didn't I know? Could I have done something different? She tried. She tried to go see her dad. She had her last visit, it was in 2025. And she said, you know what, my dad, he's subhuman. He's just not, he's just not a conscious person. Like, he doesn't realize all the damage that he has done. He doesn't take any accountability for anything. And she said, I'm done. I don't want to speak to him again. I cannot help you guys with any of the stuff. He doesn't want to talk to me. And she literally said, there's two people inside my dad. There's my dad. But then when you start talking about the murders, there's BTK, and BTK doesn't want to talk. So she goes, my dad is not going to talk to me. So stop. It's not worth trying to find other victims. Let him die. Let him do his time in jail, and that'll be it. Okay. So I highly recommend, if you guys want to look at the documentary on Netflix, definitely look into it. It's very interesting. I feel for Carrie. I feel, this, first of all, she felt violated because they took her DNA to identify her dad, which is a violation in itself. I can understand that. But at the same time, this came to light, and this was able to put a lot of these murders and a lot of these families. Kevin Bright is still alive. Stephen Vian is still alive. All these families that had loved ones that died at BTK's hands finally had answers and could be at peace. And so she says that's her therapy. That's her way of releasing everything and saying, okay, you know what? Like, I'm not responsible for what my dad did. I cannot take on his crimes. I'm a victim in this also because I lost my father. My kids don't have a grandfather. They will never talk to their grandfather. Like, it's not. So you feel for her, and you understand that, things like this affect the family of the serial killer as well. But like I said, it's super rare. Like, in history, most serial killers are loners, had bad childhoods, this is not Dennis Rader. He had a family. He had a wife who loved him. He was president of his congregation. He was a Boy Scout leader. He was all around good guy. Was he a little quirky? Was his house a little weird? Yeah. But you know what? We all have that weird neighbor. But that doesn't mean that our weird neighbor is a serial killer. But in their case, he actually was. So there was a serial killer among us in 1974 up till 2005 when he was finally. So guys, I hope you guys enjoy me talking about these serial killers and all of that. I got another one coming up real soon. So I hope you guys enjoy that. If you guys want me to talk about serial killers, cults, weird, things that have happened, murders, and that's what I'm here for. I love doing this stuff. I love doing my research. I love making sure that you guys have the right information. So look into the BTK Killer on Netflix. Read Carrie Rawson's book. Do your own research. Look into it. I think it's really important to have all the facts. And I hope you guys enjoy this. Like and subscribe, like we always say. We really appreciate all the love that we are getting for our Chaos channel. We really appreciate everything, and I hope you guys like these little Among Us that I do. And like I said, give me ideas. That's what I'm here for. I love doing research. I'm all about it. So definitely look into it and let me know. All right, guys, take care. Bye.